like you're in this virtual space and you're interacting with it, but you're not actually going anywhere. So that stuff's really cool, and I think it has a little bit of ways to go with making it really comfortable and making it tactile, realistic. So that's something to keep an eye on. There's a couple companies that are working on that now, and I'll post them in the comment section below. I don't have it up right now, so that's really cool. And then there's also some research going on with virtual reality contact lenses. So contact lenses that you just put in your eye like a normal contact lens, and it superimposes a tiny screen on your retina, and basically looks like it's floating out in a couple feet of space. And then using hand gestures, you'll be able to interact with that screen and just check your emails or check your Facebook or whatever. I think that's coming too. When I read about it last time, it was a few years back. There was issues with that because of the heat generated. You have to have a certain amount of current and power going through these contact lenses to overlay an image, and over time that could damage your eyeball and cause burning or cause a lot of heat generation. And there's also the possibility that if there's certain types of compounds or chemicals or elements that are used in these contact lenses, if those leak into your eyeball, then they can cause micro poisoning or minor poisoning, or they can cause caustic burns, or just a buildup of metals or something in your eye, which obviously isn't good either. That's really interesting stuff. The last thing I want to mention that I think is interesting is, well, just the genetic stuff in general is really cool, and it's a really big field. So there's a lot of genetic research going on now, and we're at the point where you can reverse you basically can have your genetic profile mapped using something like 23andMe or Ancestry.com. You send them in a sample of your DNA, and then they send all that stuff back to you and tell you where all your ancestors were from. And that's cool. And they can also give you a little bit of insight into your genetic predispositions. So I actually did 23andMe, and I'll do another video where I talk about that a bit. And I had some genetic predispositions for, one of them was celiac disease. So I have a higher predisposition for celiacs. Which is fine. I kind of just avoid grains in general, which I think is all for the good. And I think the next thing that's coming from a lot of this genetic research is what is the optimum diet, or what is the optimum lifestyle for individuals? So this is a very difficult question. I know there's a couple companies out that claim to offer you a dietary or nutritional prescription based on your genetics. I just don't know if it's quite there yet. I think it's a lot of guesswork. And so one of the companies that does that is called Vitagene. Vitagene is just one of them. There's plenty of them actually. But basically you send in your genetics, or they map your genetics, and they give you like a dietary prescription based on those genetics. The problem with something like that is there's so much more to just your genetics with how diet affects your life. So it's going to be a dynamic interaction between the proteins in your body. It's going to have to do with your level of exercise. It's going to have to do with how you're raised, the environment you're raised, what's all in the actual food you're eating rather than just the type of food. There's just many moving, interactive, dynamic parts. And I think we'll get a clear idea or a better lens on that in the future. I think it's all coming. I think as this field of research progresses and our understanding of genetics progresses, we will have a better grasp and a better understanding of exactly how foods interact with the proteins, and how the proteins in our body interact with food, and how they're distributed, and how they're used for fuel, and how our bodies react to some of these proteins and fats and sugars and things like that. But it is a very complicated field of research, and it's very data intensive. And so I think we have a ways to go to get there. Yes, right now we can map and we can understand what are the genes, and we've done a reasonable job of figuring out where those genes came from and how they mutated over time. And then the next step is mapping all the different types of proteins and how those interact with other types of proteins, and how those interact with food, and what triggers those to turn off and on based on environment, based on diet, based on lifestyle. That's just a huge area that hasn't been fully explored and fully understood yet. In fact, I think we've only really scratched the surface of that understanding, that field right now, and there's much more to come. So within the next 10 years, Pay attention to that stuff. Basically, individualized diet plans and individualized genetic research. There's going to be companies that start to get that right and start to understand it better and better. And they'll become more and more reliable with their predictions and their understanding of individual genetic makeups. So pay attention to that. It's all really interesting. And on that note, I think I'm going to leave it at that. I covered some of the broad fields, really kind of cursory treatment, just to tell you about some of the things that I find really interesting, the things that I've been reading about over the years. Anyway, if you have any questions or comments, or you want to see the links of some of the things I mentioned real quick, send me a comment. Thanks.